My fellow citizens, have you ever questioned why some nations prosper while others watch their dreams crumble beneath their feet? Well, the answer isn't found in grand speeches or political promises. Instead, it lies in something far more fundamental, something that reveals the true character of a civilization. On November 11th, 2025, the world witnessed yet another devastating example of what happens when speed trumps safety, when profit margins matter more than human lives. The Hongqi Bridge in China's Sichuan province didn't just collapse. It disintegrated in a cloud of dust and debris that would make any engineer's blood run cold. This wasn't some ancient structure weathered by decades of use. This was a brand new bridge, completed just months earlier, spanning 758 meters of what should have been safe passage for thousands of travelers. But here's what makes this story truly terrifying. This bridge collapse represents something far more sinister than a simple engineering failure. Never in the history of modern infrastructure have we seen such a systematic pattern of catastrophic failures concentrated in a single nation within a single year. Never have we witnessed such a brazen disregard for the fundamental principles that separate civilization from chaos. Because today, when bridges built to last generations crumble within months, we're not just talking about construction problems. We're talking about a culture that has forgotten the sacred trust between government and citizen, between builder and community. But before I reveal the shocking truth behind China's infrastructure nightmare, let me tell you exactly what you're about to discover. First, I'm going to walk you through the terrifying moment when the Hongqi Bridge collapsed, showing you footage that will make you question every bridge you've ever crossed. Then, I'll expose the systematic corruption and corner-cutting that has turned Chinese infrastructure into a deadly gamble for millions of innocent people. Finally, I'll reveal the chilling pattern of cover-ups and silencing tactics that keep this crisis hidden from the world. What I'm about to show you isn't just another construction accident. This is evidence of a phenomenon so widespread, so deeply rooted in institutional failure, that it threatens the very foundation of China's economic miracle. I've spent weeks analyzing government reports, construction records, and eyewitness accounts to bring you the complete picture that mainstream media refuses to discuss. Picture this. You're driving along National Highway 317, a major transportation artery connecting remote mountain communities to the outside world. The road winds through breathtaking landscapes of Sichuan province, where towering peaks meet rushing rivers in scenes that should inspire awe, not terror. You approach the Hongqi Bridge, a modern marvel of engineering that represents China's ambitious infrastructure expansion into its most challenging terrain. Everything seems normal as you begin your crossing. The bridge deck stretches ahead, solid concrete and steel promising safe passage across the valley below. Other vehicles move confidently alongside you, their drivers trusting in the same assumption that has guided human civilization for centuries. When we build bridges, they stay built. When engineers sign off on safety, we believe them. When governments approve construction, we assume they've done their job. But on this November morning, that fundamental trust was about to be shattered in the most spectacular and terrifying way imaginable. The first warning signs appeared on Monday when monitoring equipment detected what engineers call slope deformation on the right bank of the bridge section. This technical term describes something far more ominous. The very ground supporting the bridge was beginning to shift and slide. Local authorities, to their credit, immediately recognized the danger and launched an emergency response. Traffic was diverted, warning signs were erected, and by 11 that night, all stranded vehicles had been evacuated from the danger zone. For a brief moment, it seemed like disaster had been averted through quick thinking and proper emergency protocols. But the mountain had other plans. By Tuesday afternoon, conditions on the surrounding slopes had deteriorated beyond the point of no return. Heavy rains and geological instability triggered massive landslides that no amount of emergency planning could prevent. The approach bridge, the critical section connecting the main span to solid ground, began to buckle under forces it was never designed to withstand. What happened next was captured on video by witnesses who couldn't believe what they were seeing. The bridge didn't just crack or sag. It didn't gradually settle or show signs of distress that might give people time to escape. Instead, sections of the structure simply gave way, collapsing hundreds of meters into the valley below in a thunderous cascade of concrete, steel, and broken dreams. The footage shows enormous clouds of dust and debris billowing up from the impact zone as bridge piers and deck sections that had stood confidently just moments before were reduced to rubble. The sound alone, captured on cell phone videos that quickly went viral across Chinese social media, tells the story of engineering failure on a scale that defies comprehension. But here's what makes this collapse truly disturbing. The Hongqi Bridge was built by Sichuan Road and Bridge Group, a massive state-owned enterprise that boasts of being a Fortune Global 500 company. This isn't some fly-by-night contractor cutting corners in rural backwaters. This is supposedly one of China's premier infrastructure companies, with 15 direct subsidiaries, over 100 affiliated companies, and more than 16,000 employees. Their corporate website proudly displays awards and accolades that read like a who's who of construction excellence. 11 Lubin Prizes, 7 Zhan Tianyu Prizes, 18 National Quality Project Awards, 7 National Science and Technology Progress Awards. These aren't participation trophies. These are the highest honors in Chinese construction, supposedly reserved for companies that represent the absolute pinnacle of engineering achievement. Yet, somehow, this award-winning company managed to build a bridge that couldn't survive its first year of operation. Somehow, all those quality certifications and engineering reviews failed to catch whatever fundamental flaws led to such a catastrophic failure. Somehow, the very systems designed to prevent exactly this type of disaster proved completely inadequate when put to the test. The official response was swift and predictable. No injuries or fatalities were reported, according to government sources. The collapse was attributed to natural causes beyond human control. An investigation was promised, with results to be released at some unspecified future date. The highway was closed indefinitely, with no timeline provided for repairs or reconstruction. But this sanitized official narrative obscures a far more troubling reality. The Hongqi Bridge collapse isn't an isolated incident or a freak accident caused by unforeseeable natural forces. Instead, it represents the latest chapter in a year-long series of infrastructure failures that have exposed systematic problems in China's construction industry. Throughout 2024, bridges across China have been collapsing with alarming frequency. In July, a bridge in Jishui County crumbled after heavy rains, sending 25 vehicles plunging to their doom and killing at least 15 people. In August, another Sichuan bridge collapsed in a mudslide, swallowing 3 vehicles and leaving 5 people missing. Earlier that same month, flash floods brought down yet another bridge, killing at least 2 people and leaving dozens unaccounted for. These aren't ancient structures finally succumbing to age and neglect. These are modern bridges built during China's infrastructure boom, supposedly constructed to the highest international standards using the latest engineering techniques and materials. Yet they're failing at a rate that would be considered catastrophic in any developed nation. The pattern is unmistakable, and it points to problems that go far deeper than bad weather or geological instability. When bridges built by different companies in different provinces using different designs all fail within months of each other, you're looking at systematic issues that threaten the entire foundation of China's infrastructure network. The most chilling revelation emerges when you dig beneath the surface of these repeated failures. Chinese engineers and construction workers have a term that perfectly captures what's happening to their infrastructure. They call it tofu dreg construction, a phrase that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who understands its implications. Imagine building a bridge out of the leftover scraps from making tofu. Picture trying to create something that needs to support thousands of tons of traffic using materials with all the structural integrity of cottage cheese. That's exactly what this term describes, and it was first coined not by critics or foreign observers, but by China's own premier Zhu Rongji back in 1998. When the country's highest political leader compares major infrastructure projects to food waste, you know something has gone fundamentally wrong with the construction process. But the true horror of tofu dreg construction didn't become apparent until 2008, when a devastating earthquake struck Sichuan province and exposed the deadly consequences of cutting corners on a massive scale. During that earthquake, something unthinkable happened. While residential buildings and commercial structures suffered damage as expected in any major seismic event, it was the schools that bore the brunt of the devastation. Not just damaged or partially collapsed, but completely pancaked in ways that defied all logic and engineering principles. 20,000 children died that day, crushed beneath concrete and steel that should have protected them. 20,000 young lives snuffed out because someone decided that steel reinforcing rods were too expensive, that proper cement was an unnecessary luxury, that safety margins were just suggestions rather than requirements. The investigations that followed painted a picture so disturbing that the Chinese government actively suppressed the findings. Builders had systematically replaced steel rods with thin iron wire. They used inferior cement when they used any at all. They reduced the number of support columns and load-bearing elements to save money and speed construction. But perhaps most shocking of all was the coordinated cover-up that followed. Local governments in Sichuan province launched what they called a campaign to maintain social harmony. In reality, this meant silencing grieving parents through a combination of monetary payoffs and direct threats. Sign this contract accepting compensation and agreeing never to speak about your child's death, or receive nothing at all. This wasn't the work of a few rogue contractors operating on the margins of the construction industry. This was systematic, institutional corruption that reached into every level of government and every aspect of the building process. When your own premier compares national infrastructure to food scraps, when schools built to protect children become their tombs, when governments actively silence victims rather than address the underlying problems, you're not dealing with isolated incidents. You're witnessing the collapse of institutional integrity on a scale that threatens the very foundations of modern society. And the Hongqi Bridge collapse proves that nothing has changed in the decades since those schoolchildren died in Sichuan. The economics driving this disaster are as predictable as they are devastating. Local government officials across China face enormous pressure to demonstrate rapid economic growth in their jurisdictions. Their careers, their political futures, their personal wealth all depend on showing impressive statistics for infrastructure development and construction activity. At the same time, these same local governments have become addicted to revenues generated by construction projects. Land sales, transfer fees, development permits, and construction licenses provide the bulk of funding for local operations. In 2010 alone, these revenues totaled 3 trillion yuan, representing more than 70% of all local government income. When your paycheck depends on approving construction projects, when your political advancement requires showing rapid infrastructure growth, when your entire financial system relies on constant building activity, the incentives become crystal clear. Approve everything, build everything, and don't ask too many questions about quality or safety. The result is a construction industry that prioritizes speed above all else. Developers demand faster design timelines so they can move quickly from one profitable project to the next. Engineers are pressured to cut corners on geological surveys and structural analysis. Contractors compete by promising the lowest bids and shortest construction schedules, regardless of what compromises this requires. This race to the bottom has transformed Chinese construction from an engineering discipline into a financial optimization problem. How cheaply can you build something that will pass initial inspection? How quickly can you complete construction and collect payment? How can you minimize costs while maximizing the appearance of quality and compliance? The answers to these questions explain why bridges like Hongqi collapse within months of completion. When you replace proper geological surveys with cursory visual inspections, when you substitute cheaper materials for specified components, when you rush construction schedules to meet arbitrary political deadlines, structural failure becomes inevitable. But the most damning evidence of systematic failure comes from examining Sichuan Road and Bridge Group itself. Despite their impressive collection of awards and certifications, despite their status as a Fortune Global 500 company, this construction giant has a track record that reveals the true state of Chinese infrastructure development. Just months before the Hongqi Bridge collapse, the same company was under official investigation for another deadly incident. In August 2023, flash floods in Jinyang County destroyed a workers' residence operated by Sichuan Road and Bridge Group, killing 6 people and leaving 46 missing. The investigation revealed practices that perfectly illustrate the tofu dreg mentality. The company had illegally occupied river channels to build worker housing, ignoring basic flood safety protocols. They failed to evacuate workers despite advance warning of dangerous weather conditions. Most shocking of all, employees of the company and its parent organization actively collaborated to falsify the number of missing persons, deliberately obstructing rescue efforts to minimize their legal and financial exposure. This is the same company that built the Hongqi Bridge. This is the same organization that proudly displays awards for engineering excellence and construction quality. This is the same enterprise that the Chinese government trusts with critical infrastructure projects across the country. When award-winning companies routinely ignore safety protocols, when they actively cover up casualties from their negligence, when they prioritize profit over human life at every decision point, the collapse of structures like the Hongqi Bridge becomes not just predictable, but inevitable. The pattern extends far beyond a single company or even the construction industry itself. This represents a fundamental breakdown in the social contract between government and citizens, between institutions and the people they're supposed to serve. When citizens can no longer trust that bridges will stand, that schools will protect their children, that the very infrastructure of civilization will function as promised, the entire foundation of modern society begins to crumble. And the Chinese government's response to this crisis reveals just how deep these problems truly run. Instead of launching comprehensive investigations into construction practices, instead of holding companies accountable for their failures, instead of implementing meaningful reforms to prevent future disasters, Chinese authorities have chosen a different path entirely. They've perfected the art of information control and narrative management in ways that would make any authoritarian regime proud. Consider what happened after the Hongqi Bridge collapse. Within hours of the incident, social media posts discussing the failure began disappearing from Chinese platforms. Videos showing the moment of collapse were removed from sharing sites. News articles that questioned the bridge's construction quality or the contractor's track record simply vanished from search results. This isn't accidental censorship or technical glitches. This is deliberate, coordinated suppression of information that might damage the government's carefully constructed narrative of infrastructure excellence. When your response to bridge collapses is to silence discussion rather than investigate causes, You've revealed everything anyone needs to know about your priorities. But the censorship goes far beyond just removing embarrassing videos or critical news articles. The Chinese government has developed sophisticated techniques for managing public perception of infrastructure failures that deserve recognition for their sheer audacity, if nothing else. Take the phenomenon known as harmonizing dissent. When parents of children killed in school collapses demanded answers, they weren't met with investigations or accountability. Instead, they were offered what authorities called stability maintenance payments. Accept this money, sign this agreement never to discuss your child's death publicly, and disappear quietly into private grief. Refuse and face harassment, surveillance, and potential imprisonment for disrupting social harmony. This approach has been refined and perfected over decades of infrastructure failures. Local officials have become experts at identifying potential troublemakers, isolating them from media contact, and neutralizing their ability to organize or advocate for change. The message is crystal clear. Accept whatever explanation the government provides, or face consequences that make losing your home or livelihood seem trivial by comparison. The international implications of this systematic cover-up campaign extend far beyond China's borders. When a major economic power routinely suppresses information about infrastructure safety, when they prevent independent investigation of construction failures, when they silence victims and witnesses through intimidation and bribery, the entire global community suffers. How can international investors make informed decisions about Chinese infrastructure projects when accurate safety data is systematically suppressed? How can foreign governments assess the reliability of Chinese construction companies bidding on projects in their countries? How can international engineering standards organizations maintain meaningful oversight when one of the world's largest construction markets operates in complete secrecy? The answer is simple: they can't. And this information asymmetry has created a situation where Chinese construction companies can export their tofu dreg practices to unsuspecting countries around the world through initiatives like the Belt and Road Program. Right now, at this very moment, Chinese companies are building bridges, highways, railways, and airports in dozens of countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. These projects are funded by Chinese banks, designed by Chinese engineers, and constructed using Chinese materials and methods. But the host countries have no way of knowing whether they're getting world-class infrastructure or expensive disasters waiting to happen. The Hongqi Bridge collapse isn't just China's problem anymore. It's a warning to every nation that values human life over political convenience, engineering integrity over economic expediency. When we allow speed to triumph over safety, when we permit profit margins to matter more than structural soundness, we don't just risk our bridges. We risk our civilization itself.